The Tsar Bomba, also known by the alphanumerical designation AN-602, was a thermonuclear aerial bomb and the most powerful nuclear weapon ever created and tested. The Soviet physicist Andrei Sakharov oversaw the project at Artemis 16, while the main work of design was by Sakharov, Viktor Adamsky, Yuri Babayev, Yuri Smirnov, and Yuri Trutnev. The project was ordered by CPSU First Secretary Nikita Khrushchev in July 1961 as part of the Soviet resumption of nuclear testing after the Test Ban Moratorium, with the detonation time to coincide with the 22nd Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Tested on the 30th of October 1961, the test verified new design principles for high-yield thermonuclear charges, allowing, as its final report put it, the design of a nuclear device of practically unlimited power. The bomb was dropped by parachute from a Tu-95V aircraft and detonated autonomously 4,000 meters above the Cape Sukhoy nose of Severny Island, Novaya Zemlya, 15 kilometers from Mityushikha Bay, north of the Matochkin Strait. The detonation was monitored by United States intelligence agencies via a KC-135A aircraft, Operation SpeedLight, in the area at the time. A secret US reconnaissance aircraft named SpeedLight Alpha monitored the blast, coming close enough to have its anti-radiation paint scorched. The bung meter results and other data suggested the bomb yielded around 58 megatons, which was the accepted yield in technical literature until 1991, when Soviet scientists revealed that their instruments indicated a yield of 50 megatons. As they had the instrumental data and access to the test site, their yield figure has been accepted as more accurate. In theory, the bomb would have had a yield over 100 megatons or 418 petajoules if it had included the uranium-238 tamper, which featured in the design but was omitted in the test to reduce radioactive fallout. As only one bomb was built to completion, that capability has never been demonstrated. The remaining bomb casings are located at the Russian Atomic Weapon Museum in Sarov and the Museum of Nuclear Weapons, All-Russian Scientific Research Institute of Technical Physics, in Snezhinsk. Tsar Bomba was a modification of an earlier project, RN-202, which used a ballistic case of the same size but a very different internal mechanism. Many published books, even some authored by those involved in product development of 602, contain inaccuracies that are replicated elsewhere, including wrongly identifying Tsar Bomba as RDS-202 or RN-202. In the late 1950s Cold War, the US nuclear weapons arsenal greatly exceeded that of the USSR in quantity of weapons, total explosive yield of weapons, and the ability to deliver the weapon. In the early part of the decade, the Strategic Air Command had begun deploying nuclear-capable bombers as well as actual weapons to air bases hosted by US allies within striking distance of the Soviet Union, as well as deploying them on aircraft carriers and on medium-range ballistic missiles in the United Kingdom. The USSR had a credible ability to threaten American allies in Western Europe and Asia via a limited bomber and short-range missile force, had tested a multi-stage thermonuclear weapon in 1955 and had begun testing a prototype rocket for an intercontinental ballistic missile in 1957. Its leadership was well aware that the USSR's deployed nuclear forces in 1960 could not reliably and credibly threaten targets in the continental United States, and that in the event of war, the Soviet Union would struggle to reply in kind. This in turn threatened to weaken Soviet leverage in hotspots like Berlin, which had been the subject of Soviet and American tensions since the end of World War II. Given the Soviet Union's strategic disadvantage concerning America's nuclear weapons possessions, foreign policy and propaganda considerations during the leaderships of Georgy Malenkov and Nikita Khrushchev made a response to the perceived US nuclear blackmail imperative for both international and domestic reasons. The creation of the Tsar Bomba represented part of a larger effort to maintain the concept of nuclear deterrence and to impress and terrify both domestic and international audiences with the strength of the Soviet nuclear weapons program, even though the weapon itself was arguably impractical. The bomb was officially known as Product 602 or AN 602 and codenamed Ivan. The usage of different names can be a source of confusion. The Tsar Bomba, being a modification of the RN-202, is sometimes mistakenly labeled as RDS-37, RDS-202 or PH-202, also known as Product 202. Unofficially, the bomb would later become known as Tsar Bomba and Kuzka's mother. The name Tsar Bomba, loosely translated as Emperor of Bombs, comes from an allusion to two other Russian historical artifacts, the Tsar Cannon and the Tsar Bell, both of which were created as showpieces but whose large size made them impractical for use. The name Tsar Bomba does not seem to have been used for the weapon prior to the 1990s. The name Kuzka's mother was inspired by the statement of Khrushchev to then US Vice President Richard Nixon, "We have funds at our disposal that will have dire consequences for you. We will show you Kuzka's mother." The Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, designated the test as Joe 111 using their Joe counting scheme, which had begun with RDS-1 in 1949. After the successful test of the RDS-37 KB-11 employees, Sakharov, Zeldovich and Davydenko, performed a preliminary calculation and, on February 2, 1956, they handed over to N.I. Pavlov a note with the parameters for charges of 150 megatons, or 628 petajoules, and the possibility of increasing the power to 1 gigaton of TNT, which is about 4.2 exajoules. After the creation in 1955 of the second nuclear center, NII 1011 in 1956, by a resolution of the Council of Ministers, the centre was assigned the task of developing an ultra-high power charge, which was called Project 202. On March 12, 1956, a draft joint resolution of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and the Council of Ministers of the Soviet Union on the preparation and testing of the 202 product was adopted. The project planned to develop a version of the RDS-37 with a capacity of 30 megatons, or 126 petajoules. RDS-202 was designed with a maximum calculated power release of 50 megatons, or 209 petajoules, with a diameter of 2.1 meters, a length of 8 meters, and weighing 26 tons with a parachute system. It was structurally coordinated with the Tu-95-202 carrier aircraft, which was specially converted for its use. On June 6, 1956, the NAI 1011 report described the RDS-202 thermonuclear device with a design power of up to 38 megatons, or 159 petajoules with the required task of 20 to 30 megatons, or 84 to 126 petajoules. In reality, this device was developed with an estimated power of 15 megatons, or 63 petajoules. After testing the product's 40 GN 245 and 205, its tests were deemed inappropriate and cancelled. The Tsar Bomba differs from its parent design, the RN-202, in several places. The Tsar Bomba was a three-stage bomb with a Trutnev Babayev second and third stage design, yielding 50 megatons. This is equivalent to about 1,570 times the combined energy of the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 10 times the combined energy of all the conventional explosives used in World War II, 1/4 of the estimated yield of the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa, and 10% of the combined yield of all other nuclear tests to date. A three-stage hydrogen bomb uses a fission bomb primary to compress a thermonuclear secondary, as in most hydrogen bombs, and then uses energy from the resulting explosion to compress a much larger additional thermonuclear stage. There is evidence that the Tsar Bomba had several third stages rather than a single very large one. RDS-202 was assembled on the principle of radiation implosion, which was previously tested during the creation of RDS-37. Since it used a much heavier secondary module than in the RDS-37, two primary modules or charges located on opposite sides of the secondary module were used to compress it. This physical charging scheme was later used in the design of the AN-602, but the AN-602 thermonuclear charge itself, or secondary module, was new. The RDS-202 thermonuclear charge was manufactured in 1956 and was planned for testing in 1957, but it was not tested and put into storage. 2 years after the manufacture of the RDS-202 in July 1958, it was decided to remove it from storage, dismantle it, and use automation units and charge parts for experimental work.